At any rate, I balk at the result. Photomolecular dissipation.
Cartoons!
Ed, and Eddy, one of the most beloved Cartoon Network shows of all time. And it's definitely a very good one in my eyes, although I don't know if I would consider this in my top 10 favorite Cartoon Network cartoons. Only time will tell if it will make my top 10. But this show, I definitely really enjoy. In fact, it's probably the best Cartoon Network show so far on this list I reviewed. We got a lot to talk about today, and maybe this won't be my only time ever talking about Ed, and Eddy. I don't know yet, but let's get started. More than likely, you were probably banned from watching this show as a kid, more than any other Cartoon Network cartoon like The Courage the Cowardly Dog or Powerpuff Girls even. Heck, I was banned from watching this cartoon because I was apparently too young, yet my older brother was allowed to watch this cartoon, and he's only 2.5 years older than me. I'm not just bringing up my brother at random because in this show, Eddy has an older brother and there's a similarity to it, but we'll get to that later. Let's first talk about the Eds in Ed order, I guess, with Ed. The funniest of the Ed. Actually, not only that, but Ed is the funniest character in all of animation. And I'm talking all of animation. Just listen to his non sequiturs.
I'm a woodpecker. Except with dirt.
They're all random and stupid and don't make sense, but yet I love them. I think they're very funny. I love 99% of them. Some of my favorites from Ed are I'm a Woodpecker or Buttered Toast or anytime that Ed thinks he's a monster. It's hard to really talk about Ed without bringing up his jokes, but yet that's like every single line for him. Everything that he does just makes me happy. Like every time I see him on screen, I get some joy out of watching it. Ed, and Eddy is a great comedy show. It's definitely a show to watch when you're in a bad mood for when you want some cheer. For the most part. Next up of the Eds is Double D, and I have to talk about his design flaw right away. No, not the hat or sock on his head that we never get to see. Double D looks like a girl. When I was a kid, I thought he was a girl. In fact, I didn't realize that he was a boy until I became an adult. Yet, despite me being banned from watching this show as a kid, it didn't mean that I tried to watch the show when my older brother watched this cartoon, via sneaking that is. That is why whenever Double D spoke, it always confused me. When your character looks like a girl but sounds like a boy, it distracts the child in me. Then again, I thought DD sounded like a girl as a child as well. But regardless of the design, I love Double D, and he's probably what truly makes this show amazing. You see, if it was just Ed and Eddy without Double D, this show would be boring as fuck. There would be no ground to reality, no straight man. Not that Double D is a full straight man, he's not like, say, Squidward, but he does make the show have some established ground rule. If he wasn't there, it would just be the two other Eds doing idiotic schemes with nothing creative. And there is a shitty show that does exist with that kind of premise. It's called Squirrel Boy. Squirrel Boy is basically what happens when you try to make Ed and Eddy without Double D. But we'll talk about that show later on in the marathon since it is part of the marathon. I think people do like to consider me Double D from time to time, considering this piece of fan art exists, and it looks good. But I've always felt a mix of all three of the Eds for me. Speaking of the Eds, last up is Eddy, the guy who pulls all the schemes. The guy that more or less starts the plot of each episode. It's pretty simple, really. He wants to scam all the kids in the cul-de-sac at least a quarter each time so that he can buy jawbreakers. Sometimes he even scams the other Eds, as we saw him do in the Hypnosis episode. In a way, this always sounds like you should hate someone like Eddy, but it works because Eddy never really succeeds. I mean, he does technically get a jawbreaker and eats it in the first episode, but other than that, he never really gets any jawbreakers. By the way, that's not what actual jawbreakers look like. All I have to say is with Ed and Eddy, those jawbreakers, I think you'd be breaking more than just your jaw if you ate those. Eddy's idea is always fun to watch in my eyes, whether it be putting cardboard boxes on a wagon and calling it a bus, the giant water slide in the first school episode, using people's trash as treasure, or even gambling with a squirrel when there was an epidemic in the cul-de-sac.
Hey, find the nut. Where's the nut? Here's the nut. Round you go. Come on, pick. This one. This. Ooh. Sorry, you lose.
This show also breaks the fourth wall. Like, a lot.
I love this music. It is so shiny.
We could just go to our house, Eddy.
What? And ruin the plot? 5 cents? Or 25 days in the pokey? Huh?
Wrong cartoon, Eddy.
And it's just fun to watch. The episode 1 + 1 = Ed was pretty much the concept of the fourth wall for the whole episode.
This is fun!
I love how the characters make jokes about this.
Quack! Hey, you're gonna hurt somebody! This ain't a cartoon!
Sure, it ain't, Eddy.
Who writes this guy's stuff?
I believe that would be Danny Antonucci. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I bring him up because the creation of Ed, Edd, and Eddy always astounded me. You see this show here? This is The Brothers Grunt. This show was made for MTV, and this was the first thing that he worked on. Look at this shit.
That's disturbing.
And do you know why Danny made Ed, Edd, and Eddy? It's because he was dared to make a kids show. And because of this dare, he ended up making one of the greatest cartoons of all time. I say that was the greatest dare in existence. And apparently Brothers Grunt was created to replace Beavis and Butthead to make their channel more appealing to all audiences. And how are the results?
But first, they must be cleansed.
Yeah, this show was a major failure. And I honestly can't believe that the guy who created the Brothers Grunt would move on to create Ed, Edd, and Eddy.
Canadians are weird.
Oh, that's another thing. I know that most Cartoon Network shows are American-based, but some official Cartoon Network shows are made in other countries. I don't know how exactly that fits into the marathon, but I'm going off the list because that's what this marathon is. Every official Cartoon Network cartoon. Ed, Edd, and Eddy is from Canada, and looking through the voice actors and actresses for this show kind of tells me that. Let's go through the rest of the characters of this show to showcase what I mean. Like Kevin, the jock who constantly beats up the Eds.
We'll have it cleaned up in a jiffy.
I'll clean you! Dorks! Dork! Dork! Dork!
That voice that you heard there is Kathleen Barr. Pardon me for not realizing that at first because this is how I'm used to her sounding.
Starlight, you got us this far with just my illusions and Discord's annoying personality. Listen to your best friend.
I thought that was Tara Strong at first doing the voice because it sounded like Terrence from Foster's. But no, that's the same voice as Trixie and Chrissy from My Little Pony. If you need a boy character to be voiced by a woman, you should get Kathleen Barr if you can't get Tara Strong, cause Kathleen Barr is a great voice. Unfortunately, Kevin's voice might be the best thing about him. There really is not much else to say about him, or rather, like about him. His purpose is to screw over the Eds. Whenever the Eds make a scheme, he needs to ruin it. That kind of is his purpose. I guess it's cool that he has a motorcycle, but it gets kind of awkward when he prefers his motorcycle over Naz. We'll get to Naz in a minute, but if I can give credit, at least he's not as bad as Sarah. Sarah, I absolutely hate. And yes, it does relate a lot to the sibling thing. Everything that I hate about Sarah is technically the same thing with Kevin, but what makes Sarah worse is the voice.
Disgusting freezer experiments, and after that, set up our picnic outside!
Sarah sounds like if you put your TV on to watch Arthur, and then you max the volume on your TV every time that DW was on. That is all that I hear whenever Sarah yells at Ed. Ed is funny and idiotic enough to make this work, I suppose. I mean, at the very least, he does get paid, but not someone like Eddy who is technically smarter. And there are some episodes where Eddy does get the short end of the stick, like Sorry Wrong Ed. Although it was so fun the first time that they babysat Sarah, and just trapping Sarah in the laundry basket was one of the funniest things ever. Yeah, the whole cul-de-sac ignoring the Eds is a mixed bag in all honesty. Ralph I like, but it's usually when he's a side character. Not when he's the main focus. Even in the episode where Ed works for him to peel potatoes, not Ralph. As for Ralph's background, I really don't know what to say. It's just there. I don't really know what to say, as well as his animal. Naz is hard to talk about because there really is not much to her character. She's kind of in the middle. I don't really like it when she's a plot device, but I do like it when she's nice to the Eds. Jimmy is annoying. Whenever he's with Sarah, he's annoying, or just being annoying in general. His joke about his braids barely is mentioned in the show. He's more often shown as a wimp, unless he gets hypnotized or has a magic boomerang. Johnny I like because he's one of the few characters in Ed, Edd, and Eddy that don't annoy me, and he's nice to the Eds, and nice in general, and even goes along with the Eds' schemes. The problem with Johnny, though, is that he's the most bland character of the whole show. Let's be honest here, you wouldn't remember Johnny if Plank wasn't with him. And well, you didn't hear this from me, but Plank is a psychopath and a sociopath. This show doesn't show the adults, by the way. They are mentioned throughout the show, but they are never shown. And Eddy even brings up his older brother throughout the show, but he doesn't show up till the series finale. But even then, I don't mind it because the show was never about the adults. It's about the kids. It's about summer. It's what makes this show work. This show is about having summer fun. Actual childhood, or rather the perfect fictional childhood. Ed, Edd, and Eddy feels timeless. I think the show is supposed to take place in the 50s or 60s, or rather how the creator of this show remembered growing up in the 60s, despite the fact that this is a 90s cartoon lasting to the early 2000s. But I do love that. You can watch this show at any given time and it'll feel perfect. It really does feel timeless. Actually, about that, Ed, Edd, and Eddy is the longest running Cartoon Network cartoon of all time. and it definitely deserves that title, as it ran for 5 seasons and had 1 season 6 episode. The show technically ran for 11 years. Sure, that's less than Nick's SpongeBob or even Rugrats, but still. Cartoon Network shows don't usually last as long as Nick's shows, and because that's a good thing, because if they lasted for too long, the show will usually go into a seasonal run. I hope the Loud House doesn't have this problem in the future, because if it goes on forever, then it will have the same problem. I said early 2000s for Ed and Eddy because that's when CN aired most of their episodes, even though 2009 was the technical end year of the show. Speaking of ending of shows, I want to talk about when Ed and Eddy went to school in season 5. Because before this Cartoon Network 64 marathon, I have never actually seen a single episode of the Eds going to school. People have always told me that this is where the show jumped the shark and went downhill. Has it? Remember, I'm watching every single episode of every single show for this marathon. And I don't think for Ed's case that the show went downhill. This is my first time watching the school thing, but I don't think it went downhill. I can't call it seasonal rot per se like with the Powerpuff Girls. There are definitely bad episodes in the school era, let's call it. Like the Halloween special, where Ed sees too many movies and beats up everyone in the cul-de-sac for no reason. They are completely innocent in this episode, by the way. And Double D and Eddy get punished for his crimes despite the two doing nothing wrong. As a whole, I don't think the show dipped in quality. There are only 2 major problems I had with this show as a whole, which is a lot less than most shows. The first is the titles. I'm gonna be as blunt as possible. Ed, Edd and Eddy has the worst titles in any cartoon ever. This includes DC Superhero Girls 2019, which had a hashtag for each of their episodes. That's because the titles of an episode are supposed to tell you what you are in for, or at the very least, help distinguish a different episode from one another. Every episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy has Ed in it. What's the Christmas episode in the winter? Fa La La Ed, right? Oh no, wait, it's actually Jingle Jangle Ed. Fa La La Ed is the Christmas in July episode.
Do you say what I say?
Where'd you get that mistletoe? It's July.
The Boomerang episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy isn't the Boomerang episode. It's called Hand Me Down Ed. Even my favorite episode of Ed and Eddy, 1 + 1 = Ed, it doesn't have anything to do with the fourth wall. It's just a random title. The episode where Eddy tries to get taller is A Pinch to Grow an Ed. The episode that introduces the Urban Rangers isn't called Urban Ranger Ed, it's called Oath to an Ed. And every episode is like that, which makes this confusing when looking up the show, specifically certain episodes. The other major problem with the show are the Kankers sisters. And if there's any reason why you would have been banned from watching this show, it's these 3 people here. Fuck these characters. Actually, you know what? They're not characters. They're plot device. What they do is come in at the last minute of the episode, even if they weren't in the episode prior, and punish the Eds for their wrongdoing. Sometimes the Eds didn't even do anything wrong in the episode. The episode where Eddy tries to get taller, the Kankers sisters come in out of nowhere and ruin everything. The Hypnotism episode, Kankers come in out of nowhere and ruin everything. The episode with the old photo camera, Eds are winning, and then the Kankers ruin everything. And trust me, a bad ending has a good chance of leaving a sour taste in your mouth, even if the rest of the episode is good. Even the actual show admits this is bad.
Who's standing up to a cliche show ending for me?
Using a character like Kevin, Sarah, or even Ralph would have been better to stop the Eds, not these 3 assholes. Everyone else in Ed, Edd and Eddy have some kind of personality. The Kankers don't. They live in a trailer park and torture who they come across. It's like a giant storm system with these 3, and 95% of the time they're torturing the Eds. The other 5% is when they're torturing each other or someone else in the cul-de-sac. They all sound annoying and they do everything they can to fucking piss me off. If the Eds are the best trio in Cartoon Network, then the Kankers are the worst trio in Cartoon Network. And even characters that I hate, like Sarah and Jimmy, are better than the Kankers. Give the Kankers this, they have the perfect name for themselves. Canker is usually a synonym for cancer, or cankersaur, meaning pain. And then, of course, there's the creepy fetish aspect with the Kankers.
Wait, what are you doing? I'm an angel!
I'm too young!
I have no idea why anyone thought that this was a good idea. First of all, it's not funny. Even if the Eds did something bad, Kevin or Ralph or even Sarah would have been better characters to use to punish the Eds. And secondly, it feels illegal. If the Kankers are minors, then this is bad because there's a lot of fan art of them doing sexuality, and why would anyone want to see that? And all I did was search their name on Google, and those were the first results. And if the Kankers are adults, then I'm calling this statutory rape. Even Eddy admitted in the show to these girls that he's a minor.
Ed, your story's getting weird. I'm a minor, stop!
I suppose since I'm nearing the end of the review that the animation industry often has pedophile implications, and it's been starting since the 90s with Dexter. We're just gonna focus on Cartoon Network today. I wanted to bring this up in my Powerpuff Girls 2016 review, and I probably still will when I get to it, but it's disgusting. Even good shows like Steven Universe have this problem.
Didn't want to do this, but you leave me no choice. Underwear, go!
So, someone at Cartoon Network wrote, I want to see a 13-year-old boy naked and have him save the day by taking off his underwear, and then you decide to not only write it, but to also have it passed around the whole studio, then drawn, voice acted, then storyboarded, sent to South Korea, animated, fully fixed, and then air on TV without a single person on the staff asking, why? You didn't need to have Steven get naked. You chose him to be naked. See, this is what happens when you don't 100% look over your shit before you air it. Wait, what? Not for this review, thank you. Even if it is on the eds. Cartoon Network, by the way, right now in May of 2020, still has this problem. And I can blame shows like Ed, and Eddy, and Dexter starting this. Seriously, Cartoon Network, it's been about 30 years with this problem, and you're still doing this shit. You need to take a seat. And people say that those implications didn't exist back then. No, they did. We just didn't notice them. Anywho, fuck the Kankers and their shitty ending. Other than that though, I really do love this show. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Canadian cartoon of the 2000s, that belongs to Ruby Gloom, but Ed, and Eddy is my favorite Canadian cartoon of the 1990s. It's almost as good as Friendship is Magic in my eyes. And maybe it's a coincidence or not, but Ed, and Eddy and Friendship is Magic have a similar or maybe even the same amount of good and bad episodes of their shows, at least the same average, where you will find as many bad episodes in Ed, and Eddy as you will in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And to end this review off, and even really the month of May off, I will say that I just finished the Ed, and Eddy Big Picture show for the first time ever, and it is now my favorite movie of all time that is based off a television show.
And it only took 130 episodes, 4 specials, and a movie, Eddy.
Even more than the SpongeBob movie, the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic movie, the Winnie the Pooh movie, the Teen Titans Go movie, and even the Powerpuff Girls movie. And I do have to agree with everyone else here. Why couldn't this have gotten the theatrical treatment over the Powerpuff Girls? As for reviewing anything Ed, and Eddy in the future, I don't think I have any plans on giving a single episode or animation review per se. Normally I don't like rewatching old cartoons, especially if I didn't grow up with them, but I think even after this marathon, I'm gonna rewatch Ed, and Eddy for fun. I really had fun watching this show. And I don't care if I saw every episode now. I really want to rewatch them and see what cool new things I can find in each episode. I don't really watch older stuff for fun unless it's for a review, but no, I really love this show. If I don't put this in my top 10 favorite Cartoon Network shows of all time, that will be because of the Kankers sisters. Get rid of them and this show would easily be my favorite Cartoon Network show of the 90s. That's Courage, the Cowardly Dog, in case you're wondering. But Ed, and Eddy is a definite pass. Go watch this show. It is a good show, despite its flaws. And there's a reason why this show is as popular as, say, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and Steven Universe. However, this is not the last time that I will talk about Ed, and Eddy, because I do plan on giving the movie its own review, as a Ryan Animation review, because I really love that movie, and it does give me a lot to say. Unfortunately, it's going to be like 2 years from now when I review that movie, but I am definitely going to review that movie. Next time when we return to this marathon, which will be in the next month of June, we're taking a look at Mike Luganog and why every single Cartoon Network show from the 90s aren't as good as people claim them to be.